Good day, mates. Going to have a spot of tea today, for we are studying British imperialism. Oh, excuse me, American imperialism. Oh boy, my British accent is terrible today. I don't know what the problem is, but you're gonna go a little better than that. What I'm basically pointing out is we're getting ready to study a time in which America begins to act very much like Britain, in that we begin to take colonies and control territory in far-flung places of the world. This is a bit surprising because we didn't much like being a colony of Britain's, so it's strange that we would make other places a colony of ours. And so we'll talk about what are the forces that were at work in the late 1800s and early 1900s that made this a reality for America, but we're certainly going to be studying the growth and strength of America growing as a global power. Now, while liberal critics would tend to think that imperialism was kind of an embarrassment and showed the hypocrisy of our nation in not really living up to our values of letting people decide what kind of government they shall have and democratic principles, conservatives would point out that we really had to keep up with the other world powers, and if we didn't take over places like Hawaii, well, certainly other countries would have. So, in a way, it was just a reality of the times, and if we wanted to keep up with the times, we needed to take colonies, and the countries that were taken over by us as opposed to other countries were relatively fortunate in that sense. So whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, the imperialist era certainly is a really fascinating time period, that's for sure. And so we're going to look at how it was justified and criticized in its time period. So let's look here at the things that we're going to be learning. We're going to be learning what does imperialism mean, and what factors motivated Americans to be imperialistic, and what countries did we first seek to control, and why. Okay? Here's a great quote by William McKinley, who was president during this time period. He said, "We need Hawaii just as much and a good deal more than we did California. It is manifest destiny." So remember the idea of manifest destiny. We're really reviving it and extending it here. Manifest destiny said that God likes us best. He likes that government, democracy, which represents or respects his creation and giving man free will. And so as such, and of course, not only did he want us to spread over our continent, he now is going to want us to spread our values and government worldwide. And it'll benefit us as well as it will benefit them. That is what basically William McKinley is assuming here in this quote. And he calls this an extension of manifest destiny, the taking of colonies. Okay? You might want to write, oh, by the way, this presentation goes with this graphic organizer right here. It says Causes of American Imperialism, and it has these 4 boxes on it. Up there where it says imperialism, you might want to write this definition of imperialism, which is basically whenever one country, a stronger nation, controls a weaker nation, and they might control them just economically, they might control them militarily, or they might control them politically, or they might control them in all 3 ways. But basically, it's when a larger country controls a smaller, weaker nation. Maybe not geographically smaller, but rather economically, militarily, or politically smaller than the larger nation or stronger nation. Okay? So, the first causes of American imperialism include global competition. Basically, European and Asian countries were establishing colonies worldwide, and we wanted to keep up with the Joneses and make sure we had our own piece of the pie. And as I said, we really saw this as an extension of manifest destiny, that, you know, God likes us best and he wants to see us grow. As a example of this global competition thing, we're going to be looking at a map here where you can see all the other countries of the world and how they had gained colonies worldwide. So here's the key, and I'll just point out a couple important ones. So let's look at Britain. If you see up here, actually I don't see Britain on this, oh, here it is, Great Britain, yes. If you see right here, this like seafoam green color, that is the color of the British colonies around the world. And so you can see that here is Canada, and here in Africa are parts of British colonies that they control, here in India, in Southeast Asia, and in Australia, and also in Indonesia. So it was said during this time period that the sun never sets on the British Empire, which basically means no matter what time zone the sun is shining on, there's a colony in that time zone that is controlled by Britain all the way across the globe. So that's just an example of a country that had been colonizing for a long time, and one that we wanted to maintain our reputation with. You can also see here, for example, the Netherlands, and how they have, that's a dark color so it's easy to see, how they've maintained a certain level of presence around the world. And so we just basically were trying to keep up with the other major powers of the world. and that's what global competition led us to do, is to also seek colonies worldwide. The second thing is it's really important that you understand that our military had changed substantially. And suddenly our military is dependent upon, and our whole economy really is going to be dependent upon steam-powered ships. And these ships cannot carry an infinite amount of fuel. They need to stop and reload with coal to keep themselves chugging around the world, whether they be going to a war front or trade. So military strength is going to become important. And in order to see ourselves, it says here that power is seen as necessary to balance against other nations. We not only need to have a strong country ourselves, but we need to have colonies. And these colonies will help us with our ability to support a navy, okay? Because we've constructed these modern battleships, and we need naval bases worldwide, so as we send our ships around the world, they can stop every now and then for coal refueling. So this guy's important. His name is Admiral Alfred Mahan. He was a former naval officer, and he's also a historian. And he writes a book called The Importance of Sea Power. And during this time period, he talks about how important it is that we have ships capable of serving our interests around the world, and how important it is that we have a larger navy, that we have these naval bases around the world that are capable of allowing our ships to stop and refuel. And he also said we needed a canal through Central America so that our ships didn't have to go all the way around the tip of South America to get from the Pacific to the Atlantic. So he really lays out these three goals that we need to achieve during this time period: a larger navy, naval bases, and this canal. And by the end of this imperialistic time period, we will in fact have achieved all three of those. So he laid out a vision for the country, and it's going to be realized, and that's another reason why imperialism occurs during this time period, is it's considered necessary to maintain our military strength. The third thing is we have new markets. One, we need raw materials. There are raw materials in other countries that can benefit us, whether they be oil or coal or timber or other deposits, mining deposits, but also exotic fruits and things that we'd not had access to before, whether it be pineapples or oranges or bananas, things that we want to bring into the country. And then also we hope to sell some of our excess farm production outside of the country. If you remember, we've had the populist movement. The farmers have lots of debts they need to sell. They're more productive than they've ever been before with all the farm machinery that's been invented. And so they need some new markets to sell their stuff to, and they hope that prices will go up, and that will enable them to pay their debts. So foreign trade is seen as the big answer to all the economic problems we have in the United States. So we're hoping to create some new markets outside of our country at the same time as we get new raw materials into our country from these colonies. And then finally, we really feel that we have cultural superiority, that it's a burden that we share our superior culture with the lesser peoples of the world. If you remember, there's this concept called social Darwinism, which basically says there's an assumption during this time period that our culture is superior. This is a time period when people did not really respect tribe or understand tribal cultures, like the Native Americans, or in Africa they had lived tribally, or in the Middle East had lived tribally for a long time, and they typically were living sustainably and in very stable communities. But because we didn't see a lot of technological advancement in those societies, we assumed that their material condition was worse, and so therefore that they really needed the superior Western civilization to come in and be revealed to them so that they could advance. So the idea is that our culture is superior. It's therefore our burden to go spread it and civilize and Christianize the rest of the world, and that therefore we should go forth boldly and do that. And so since it's our responsibility to do this, we see a lot of missionaries going out through the world during this time period, and they're well-intentioned. The idea is that there's only one way to get to heaven. It's through Christianity, and therefore it's our burden to go save these people and introduce them to Christianity so that they can go to heaven. And this becomes known as the white man's burden, that it's assumed that Caucasians have the superior culture, and therefore it's their burden to go share it with the rest of the world. A strong proponent of this idea was Rudyard Kipling. If you've ever seen The Jungle Book, you know something from him because he produced that whole story. And he also produced a famous poem during this time period called The White Man's Burden. And here's just some examples of some stanzas from The White Man's Burden. It says, "Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine, and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, watch sloth and heathen folly, bring all your hopes to naught." So the idea here is that it's white people who have to have this burden. They have to go try and solve the problems of the lesser countries of the world and make peace where there's war and feed the hungry and try and cure illness. And the problem is that you're trying to help these people and they don't really appreciate your help. And their laziness and their silliness will eventually, everything you do, they'll kind of undo it through their own ignorance and lack of appreciation. It says, "Take up the white man's burden, no tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go mark them with your living," oh, that should say make them with your living, "and mark them with your dead." So the idea is that, and oh, by the way, taking these colonies isn't going to be luxurious. It's not going to be like going to a day of the spa or whatever. Instead, it's going to be very hard work. And you're not going to use their ports because they don't have any, and you're not going to use their roads because they don't have any of those either. Instead, you're going to go build their ports and their roads, and you're going to die in the process. But this is a big bummer, but since you're the white superior people of the world, it's your job to go forth and do this. And so then the final stanza I want us to look at is, "Take up the white man's burden and reap his old reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard." The idea is that once you help these people, they're still really not going to appreciate it. And they're actually going to resent you for being present in their country and blame a lot of their problems on you. So we'll be analyzing things like this cartoon in class and helping see what perspective this cartoonist takes on that idea. And finally, I just want to give you the first example of imperialism that happened during this time period, and that was our acquisition of Alaska. Alaska was owned by Russia during this time period, and it was when Lincoln was president that, well, actually soon after he'd been assassinated, but he was appointed by Lincoln, that the Secretary of State, William Seward, arranged for us to buy Alaska from the Russians for $7.2 million. Everyone kind of criticizes this move during the time period. They call it Seward's folly because they think it's silly that we purchased a kind of ice box up in the northwest corner of our continent for $7 million. They couldn't really figure out what the benefits of that would be. We of course know that later this turns out to be a huge boon because we find all kinds of oil deposits in Alaska that have served our country very well. So Seward wasn't stupid after all. In fact, he was probably was definitely one of the smarter land deals we have made in our nation's history, was the purchase of Alaska. So I hope you have enjoyed our little foray into imperialism and the taking of our empire. I hear my daughter crying, so I think I better go figure out what that's about. Thanks, bye!